Opposed? Great. Oh, I want to say Kat Kemet from the Planning Department is with us online. Joe Iadenisi, same thing, from the Planning Department online. Katie's here. I think that's good for now. Okay, now we have two more applications for a license for the remainder of this year. I don't know, Scott, maybe you can explain the difference between these two and the other ones that we just voted on.
Yeah, so 433-24, that's for the remainder of this year. They're new owners. And then 434-24 is for their license for next year. It's so towards the end of the year, they wanted to have the license for the month of December and then going into next year.
So are there questions on either of those? Can we vote them both together if there are no questions? I'll read them into the docket. Any questions? We're talking about item 433-24, which is a Class 2 auto dealer license for Grand Auto Sales, and 434-24, which is also Grand Auto Sales. As Scott mentioned, sort of mid-year change of ownership next year. Is there a motion? Councilor Lucas?
Yeah, motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is anyone opposed? Great. Now we move on to all the really, almost move on to the fun stuff. The next item we have before us is a request for an extension of time to exercise a special permit at 363-23, at 333 Lexington Street. This is item number 424-24, which we have heard before. The petitioner is requesting an extension of time. Does anybody want to speak to this? Does anyone have questions about an extension of time, or shall we move? Councilor Block.
Thank you, Chair. I'd appreciate it if Jonah would explain to us the criteria that we should normally apply in evaluating a request for extension of time. Would that be all right, Jonah?
Sure. So as set forth in our zoning ordinance, the standard that sets forth is good cause. That is a broad standard, and it really is up to the discretion of this committee. I will say that the past practice of this committee for many years is to look at whether or not there's a reasonable explanation for the delay in commencing construction, and I think that's a pretty valid application of that standard, and I would recommend that the committee remain consistent with that and not really look at the underlying project.
So as a follow-up to that, keeping that standard in mind, I ask myself, has an explanation been provided to us that's a reasonable explanation for the delay that requires an extension? It's hard for me to find. I don't want to make a big deal about this, but I do feel a responsibility to our standards, and I'm just wondering how people interpret this particular request. As I read it, they anticipate selling the property, and it didn't sound like there was some. Am I mixing this up with a different one?
Did you read that somewhere?
I did.
I do not see that in writing anywhere.
I did read that. Did anybody else read that? No.
I don't see that. Oh, on the back of the agenda. Well, would planning like to address Councilor Block's question? Any information pertinent to the confines of what Mr. Temple told us that makes it relevant to consider this extension, this request for an extension of time?
Oh my God. I'm sorry, I didn't catch Councilor Block's second question. What, could you restate that?
Well, I'm just looking for a reasonable explanation for the need for an extension. And it can be anything, really. I'm just looking for that.
Have you been given a reasonable explanation for why they're requesting an extension of time?
I think the applicant reached out to both the clerk and I and stated there was some legal proceedings going on between the two property owners that may have impacted it, but beyond that, it was more to answer questions about how to request the extension. Sorry, I'm usually at home, I'm not used to this. But it is, I understand it's legal, but I would be interested if the applicant is on the call and can answer that.
Okay, thank you.
Is that adequate, or do you want to explore this further?
No,
Okay.
that's adequate.
I think reasonable is something that's open to some interpretation. Would you like to make a motion on this because this is in your ward?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Councillor Block. Is there a second? I don't even know if we need a second, but we have a second from Councillor Lucas. Let's do a roll call on this.
Counselor Block,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Counselor Farrow,
Aye.
Counselor Kelly,
Aye.
Counselor Leary,
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz, Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Laredo.
Aye.
Motion passes.
We'll probably be seeing them back in some form or another. Okay, the first request to exceed FAR as part of the public hearing tonight is number 420-24 at 16 Chask Ave, which is also in Ward 4. Planning, would you like to lead us off? Joe, I believe.
Say a few words. The planning memorandum presented a complete analysis, and in this case, planning recommends that the committee pay particular attention to the location of the addition, the presence of this house from the street, and the overall context of the neighborhood. So at this time, we'll turn it back to the chair. We're happy to pull up any plans through the permitting portal and answer any questions following the petitioner's presentation. And we are also prepared to share a draft council order if and when the time is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. We will. Is there someone here on behalf of the petitioner, Josh and Katie Rissmiller? I see this hand. I think we'll go for him, but if you're wanting to clarify anything, you can come to the podium and I'll call on you too. President Laredo.
So just a question for Ms. Wewell on the planning memo, if I could.
Sure.
So you stated in there for grading, there's no proposed change to the average grade of the house and no additional site work proposed necessitating significant regrading on the lot. What do you mean by significant regrading?
So Mr. Iadonisi worked on this, but I think our threshold, as reflected in the special permit application, would have been over 1 foot of grade change that we, did not see. And I believe Mr. Iadonisi confirmed with the applicants that the existing average grade is, relatively the same as the proposed average grade.
So just to be clear, we're talking modest, 6 inches, 9 inches a foot type of regrading on the lot rather than, 4 or 5 feet?
Yes, that is my understanding, but I will just kick it off to Mr. Iadonisi to confirm.
I'm not particularly worried about it given what's proposed here, but, going forward, that clarification would be helpful. Thank you.
Just wanted to confirm that the regrading is just going to be around where that foundation is. We never want to say that there's going to be no grade work because some level of grading is going to have to be done in order to establish additional area for a foundation whenever there's additional foundation being laid. But that would be the only work done here, given the average grade is staying the same.
Thank you, Mr. Iadonisi. I would like to clarify a few things that were not given to us as the sort of framing that we have usually heard from planning. But let's hear from the petitioner first, because perhaps they'll do that and I won't need to. Jacob, would you like to speak on behalf of your clients, I presume?
Thank you. Should I share my screen for this, or
You
can
can.
I?
You may.
All right.
Just give us your name and address and what your role is here.
Jacob Gadbois, Masters Touch. We are at 77 Main Street in Medway, representing the clients.
Are you an
Uh,
architect
Rooms.
or a design build firm, or what's your role?
Design build firm.
Oh, thank you.
So to start with a few visuals here, and to clarify a bit as well on the grading, there is no intended change in grade. So it, uh, 6 inches or less really is kind of where we're at. Maybe a little bit of pitch away from the foundation, but nothing of significance. So this house here, we need an additional 502 square feet on the FAR, which is lands at 0.1. I added these views, if you all can see this, of the red marks here from the street views, just to kind of give everybody a visual as to what this addition looks like from the street and how much of it you can actually see. So this would be the other side. There are trees and fencing in the way, so you can't really see a whole lot from the front. And it is bigger in the rear here, as you can see. These plans, I believe, are on record, and let me get to the calculations here. So what we're asking for here is, we've got a required 0.48 with the 2% bonus, which gives us the 0.5, and we would like to be at 0.6 on the FAR is where we need. I believe planning has gone through this and determined that all the criteria for our request have been met. It's in an appropriate location. It's not going to adversely affect the neighborhood. And I do have some letters from neighbors as well. I don't know if they are not in the online package, but they are in the package that we submitted. No nuisances, and access to the site over streets remains entirely unchanged. And if I can go back here to the plot plan, I'll show you the site. So here's the site. And it has an existing garage that's more like a shed. We are going to get rid of that and just add an addition to the rear of the house here. We're adding a bulkhead, and the AC pads are existing. They are over the line, but they will be heat pumps. So I believe there's an exception there. No change to the driveway, and there is ample parking as the town bylaws require. We have our floor area ratios stamped, and we have letters in support. This particular one is 9 Chask, so this is a neighbor. They are in full support of the project. We have 163 Melrose, which is a neighbor to the rear, I believe. They are also in full support. We have 12 Chask, which is the other side neighbor. Again, full support. and 15 direct abutter in full support as well.
Mr. Gadbois, you don't really need to go through each of these. I was just asking our clerk if we have seen those letters yet, and he's checking on that, in which case you do not need to run through each one of them. I'm glad you got towards the end of your presentation with what it's really all about that I wanted to be sure everyone understood, which is to raise the existing detached garage and construct a 2-story addition to the rear, exceeding FAR. That's kind of the encapsulated, I would have led with that because that's what we need to start with understanding the goals and plans here. But thank you. Do you have anything else to add, or are you all set?
That's it.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak, who have not already submitted a letter? If you did, I hope that we find it or that it gets downloaded into the archive. I don't see anyone, so let's take it into the committee. Committee members. President Laredo.
This looks just fine to me. My only question is, did you have an opportunity to speak to the neighbors?
Like have a neighborhood meeting, for instance?
The owners did, yes.
That's what I meant, not you, sir, personally, but they did?
They did.
Great, thank you. All set.
I'm getting thumbs up from the owners who are sitting right here in those uncomfortable wooden benches. Any other comments or questions from the committee? No? All right. Councilor Farrell, yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to quickly say we met with Ms. Miller earlier this week, and we viewed the property with her. It is an excellent project, and Mrs. Miller did say that she has spoken with all of the neighbors and that they were very supportive of what they're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Block.
I agree with Councilor Farrell's characterization. This is in my ward, and I move to close the public hearing and move to accept.
Thank you, Councilor Block. All in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Let's hear those conditions and findings, Ms. Weavell.
I think Mr. Iadonissi is ready to pull that up in the draft council order.
Certainly. Okay. So the draft, oh, sorry, I didn't click on the final share there. So the draft findings are that the specific site is an appropriate location for the additions that will exceed maximum floor area ratio, as underside lots and larger non-conforming dwellings are common in the neighborhood. That the additions that will exceed maximum floor area ratio as developed and operated will not adversely affect the neighborhood, as the addition is entirely to the rear and will not result in a change to the front elevation. Third, that there will be no nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians created by the additions that will exceed maximum floor area ratio, as the changes to site parking created by the removal of the garage are limited and will not significantly impact the neighborhood. Fourth, that access to the site over streets is appropriate for the types and numbers of vehicles involved with the additions that will exceed maximum floor area ratio, as no change to the site's vehicular access is proposed. And lastly, that the proposed addition that will exceed maximum floor area ratio is consistent with and not in derogation of the size, scale, and design of other structures in the neighborhood, as dwellings that exceed maximum floor area ratio appear to be common in the neighborhood, given most lots are undersized and many dwellings were constructed prior to the zoning ordinance. Moving on to the conditions, we have the standard conditions with the plot plan, as well as the elevations being binding for this. Moving on to the building permit stage, assuming this is fully approved. Secondly, that and third, that no certificate of occupancy be granted except as complying with the plans, and that we have a statement of compliance with condition 1.
That it, Mr. Iadinisi? All set?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. It's hard to follow this new format. We have a motion to approve this. Let's take a vote on that.
Counselor Block,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Counselor Farrell,
Aye.
Counselor Kelly,
Aye.
Counselor Leary,
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz,
Aye.
Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Laredo.
Aye.
Motion passes.
I'd like to thank the owners for coming and being here to answer questions in case we had any for you. Good luck with your project. Yeah. Come back. We're here every other Tuesday. Yeah, babysitter. Anyway, kidding. Who wants to come if they don't have to? Number 329-24, which is a request to waive 2 parking stalls at 15 to 17 Plaisted Road. We have seen this before. It's back before us. Let's hear an update from planning.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. So the memo presents a complete analysis. In this case, there have been no changes to the petition nor the site plan. The petitioners uploaded documentation that they are in compliance with the short-term rental ordinance. In the prior memo, planning identified lot size, grading, and the prior variance attached to this property to pay particular attention to. So we will now turn it back to the chair and are happy to pull up any plans through the permitting portal and answer any questions following the petitioner's presentation. We are also prepared to share a draft council order if and when the time is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wewell. Is the petitioner here who would like to speak on the new information that they put forward? Yes? Oh, Rob Pellegrini.
Hi, everybody. Rob Pellegrini. I represent the petitioners. My address is 63 Main Street, Bridgewater.
I think you've become muted.
Sorry about that.
Okay, you're back.
Rob Pellegrini. I'm representing the petitioners. My address is 63 Main Street, Bridgewater. Just a quick reminder, this petition was opened on September 10th, and at that time it was brought up that there was a zoning violation. Since then, the owners have submitted two affidavits, and the zoning matter has been cleared out. Just by way of quick reminder about this, the proposal is to convert the garage, which is a one unit garage, into a livable area. And at the September 10th meeting, I just sort of went over that there's a steep grade issue on the lot. This is really their only feasible way to increase the living area in the home. We're really just seeking to reduce from 3 to 1. It's also worth noting that the remaining area in the driveway is quite a bit larger than what's required. So the fact that they only have one car now would suggest that although it is legal to family, that it would be reasonable to approve this request. Can probably leave it at that and just answer any questions.
I do have a couple of questions for you. Can you share your screen to put up the plan so we can be reminded of the relationship between the garage, which I believe has already been converted into living space? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so you're not about to do that. That's already done. So the garage is near the driveway. You're reducing the number of spaces. Did you just say from 3 to 1?
From 3 to 2.
I thought you said 3 to 1 and I was confused.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so let's take a look. Let's just see what it is you're talking about. It's been since September. It's not that long ago. Most of us probably remember it. While you're pulling that up, is that the end of your presentation?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. We appreciate you hanging out in case there are more questions. Let's take a look at this.
Okay. So I've pulled out the site plan, and you can see here, this is the two remaining proposed places. Currently, there's a garage in here, so as everybody can see, if that garage were to be used, you would need to remove the two cars anyway, in order to get in there and use it. I brought up the grade change as well. As you can see, there's you're well into the 90s here, and you're around 78 here. So there's a retaining wall here that came up at the prior meeting as well. We did look at the possibility of just moving that retaining wall. However, it impacts a retaining wall that's up here and here. So the feasibility and cost of doing that was very great.
Is that retaining wall at the end of the driveway existing, or did these clients
Yes.
build that? They did not build that?
No, that's been there as far as I know for as long as I've owned the home. My clients are present on this call, however, so they can certainly talk to that.
If they have important corrections to make, I see a hand raised already. They
Yes,
can
that's my
certainly do
client.
that. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Hello, this is Zen San, and I'm the owner of the property. Just to answer the retaining wall question, it has been there, and we don't even know when that was built.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All set with the presentations for now. Let's see if there are any members of the public who have comments. I don't see any in the chamber or online. If you are online and think of something, raise your virtual hand. In the meantime, we will take it into committee, Land Use Committee. President Laredo.
I guess, Ms. Wewell, this is your presentation, is that right?
Mr. Iadonisi did the bulk of
Okay, well, I just want to be really clear on a couple of things so I know exactly what's being asked for. So bottom line is this, they're enclosing or using the garage as living space. They're requesting a waiver of 2 parking spaces. It's a 2-family unit, and previously they'd been using it for short-term Airbnb, and they've submitted affidavits saying that they're no longer going to do that, and in the future they're not going to use this Airbnb either. Did I kind of summarize that the right way?
I believe that's accurate. I just would like Mr. Iadonisi to confirm since he reviewed. The
I'm
document.
sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I'm gonna let Mr. Iadonisi confirm as he reviewed all of the attachments.
Because that's not the way I read it, so I'd love to hear what Mr. Iadonisi
Yeah,
says
so
about that question.
and if I missed, that's why I wanted the clarity, because I didn't, so could someone just provide the clarity to me?
Mr.
So there
Iadonisi.
was a previously existing recorded variance for this property that allowed it to be a 2-family without the lot area and lot area per unit required that locked in the site plans. Those site plans had 3 spaces for the 2 units as a 2-family use, which required 4 units of parking. When they made changes to the parking on site, that means that they re-enter having to have 4 spaces, which is where we have to have the waiver for 2 spaces here. Hopefully that clarifies.
So may I just follow up? So the garage that's getting used as living space, is that a 1-car garage?
That's correct. That was a one-car garage, Counselor.
Okay, so they were supposed to have 4 parking spaces. They only had 3 parking spaces, including the garage, and they're now going down to 2 parking spaces.
No, they were actually supposed to only have, 3. They were just, proposing here to remove the 1 garage unit.
Could planning answer the question again for
Sorry
us so
about
we're
that.
clear?
Sorry, I
I'm
was just trying to
confused
help.
too. Maybe pull that plan up again and show us. It looked like it used to be 2 parking inside that's now just 1 residential unit and 2 side-by-side spaces proposed for the driveway. That's how I thought I was reading
And
that
that's,
plan.
and I appreciate the clarification. I may have gotten this all wrong. I just.
I
wanna
may have.
understand.
Let's take a look at it again.
I'll hold if someone, I'll let others go.
The other question, though, that I heard in your question is, you thought that they were saying they don't plan to ever do an Airbnb again or a short-term rental. I thought I read that the condition or the agreement that they made is that if they want to do a short-term rental in the future, they commit to registering it legally this time.
So to clarify those two, the 2 spaces out here in the driveway were prior existing and do remain. And then there was 1 space of garage space internal to the 2-family dwelling that previously existed. Had they not had the variance, they would be required to have 4 spaces. But with the variance, that locked in their site plans that they submitted at the time and allowed them to have 3 spaces total. And then to the second question, as far as the affidavit says that they have ceased use and says that they will register and go through the proper channels in the future. I can leave that up if need be, or turn it back to the council happily
If we are
and
all
stop sharing.
satisfied with that, that's fine. If we're not satisfied with that, or the owner who has his hand up has a different explanation, if what planning just said is true, you do not need to speak again on that. But if you have something else to say about it, we're happy to hear from you. Mr. Sun?
Sure. Thanks for allowing me to speak. I just want to address the short-term rental. The affidavit was provided by the city and we signed, so we intend to use the space as long-term rental. And we are not going to do short-term rental. And if we were, I don't think we will go through the proper channel. For the parking space, the garage was originally basement space when the building was first built, maybe 70 years ago. And some owner, maybe one of the owner 50 years ago, decided to convert that to a garage. I believe that owner only had 1 car and he just decided to try to park his car inside. But the previous owner, who had lived there for 30 years, since 1995, he has been using that space for storage. He never parked inside. Because it's almost impossible to park because the retaining wall is right by the garage opening. You have to really maneuver carefully, try to get into the garage. And at least I tried it. I was never able to manage to park inside.
Thank you
And
for
that's all I
clarifying.
want.
So there was 1 car parked inside, that's gone now, it's part of a residential unit, and you're requesting 2 parking spaces in the driveway. That's the bottom line. Back to the short-term rental thing, you are verbally telling us here today that you don't plan on ever doing short-term rentals, that you intend to use this as long-term rental. But in writing, what you've agreed to do is if and when you want to do short-term rental, you will properly apply and register this time. That leads me, and I think some of your neighbors who were concerned about this use, the opening that you may be doing that. So I wonder if that part of your agreement is necessary at all.
So the document was provided by the city to sign. I didn't write that document.
We did not write that document either, and here we are at land use trying
No,
to condition an approval for you.
Madam Chair, can I clarify?
I would just about to ask you, Mr. Temple, thank you.
That document is written just so that the petitioners will attest that if they ever do run a short-term rental, that they do it in accordance with the ordinance. We were not trying to limit them from their legal rights to run a short-term ordinance in the future.
If we're all okay with that, I just wanted to be sure we all understood what was said, not that they're attesting and writing to never running a short-term rental. They're saying if they do that, which they don't plan to do, they'll do it legally. Okay, any other comments or questions? Oh, that's right, I made a list of you all. Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question to the petitioner, Mr. Pellegrini or Mr. Sun. Just want to verify that this is a two-family house and that there are two families living in there now?
No, so as of current, we live there occupying one main house, and the other we occupy 15, and unit 17 is occupied by a long-term renter.
Is occupied by whom?
By a renter, by my tenant.
Okay, so there are two families living at this property, correct?
Yes.
All right, and your family only needs one car, correct?
Yes.
And the other family that lives there can
Has
only
one car.
use one car, or can only park one car on site, I should say.
Yes. So can I clarify? So
Yes.
when we screen renter, we will ensure they only have one car, or they have to park in tandem to make sure all the two cars fits on the driveway. Because our driveway is large enough, if you park two cars back to back, it's gonna fit.
So you're saying you can get 3 cars in there?
We can get 4 cars if we want to.
Just a few.
So we're just a few feet shorter than the legally allowed the 4 car requirement, but it is possible to park 4 cars on our driveway. It's large enough.
So, boy. So you can, if you absolutely need to, can get 3 or 4 cars in there, but are also at the same time requesting relief for those 2 additional or those 2 required parking stalls.
Maybe I can clarify. The reason for the requested relief is that the city requires 19-foot long parking areas. There's not enough for, what would that be?
38.
2 times 19 there. So, realistically, if you don't have a 19-foot vehicle, which I'm assuming they don't, then theoretically you could, but legally you do need to request the relief because you don't have 4 9 by 19 areas.
Okay, all right, I mean, I think I'm right, but you also could have just applied for relief on the size of the parking stall, just so that you know. But
I think, yeah, we probably could have done it that way as well.
all right, I'm all set, thank you.
Don't go thinking you can squeeze 4 cars in here legally. Just slightly off the record. Councilor Leary.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So this is in my ward, pretty familiar with Plaisted Road and the steepness of that hill there. I am sympathetic to the petitioners for wanting to increase some habitable space in a very tight lot on a smaller area with that steep grade, making it very difficult to do anything else. And I understand that there were some missteps with this and maybe some miscommunication with the neighbors. I think most of the concern was over the Airbnb, which it sounds like you're not going to be pursuing that. Although there is, as far as I know, no requirement for parking for Airbnbs. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm also very cognizant that this is on a very active bus route, the 57 and the 501. 57 runs all the time, and the 501 goes right downtown, runs well during the week. So you can really get around without having a car. And I'm thanks for the clarification, because I was a little confused about whether this was a single family or two family. And I also remember that your other parents or in-laws were living there for a while with you, and they did not drive, as I remember. So I really have no problem with approving this, and I would make a motion when appropriate.
Thank you, Councilor Leary. Councilor Lobovitz.
I just want to clarify, so there's a door going into the former garage to enter that lower level, is that correct?
Mr. Pellegrini?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So in order to access that door, there couldn't be a car parked in front of that door, is that also correct?
No, you can have a car parked there, and there are the width is large enough, you can just walk to the door.
Okay.
Even with the car.
Okay. That's all, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lobovitz. Any other questions or comments from the committee or any other councilors? If not, a motion has been made. Did you make a motion to close the public hearing also?
I did not. I will make that motion now. Motion to close the public hearing?
Thank you, Councilor Leary. Let's vote on that first. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Great. A motion has been made to accept this petition. Let's hear findings and conditions.
Yeah, I'll turn it over back to Joe Iadonisi to go through those.
Okay, I will zoom in a little bit. The proposed findings are that the specific site is an appropriate location for the conversion of garage to habitable space, requiring a waiver for 2 parking stalls, as the undersized lot presents significant limitations to adding habitable space or parking stalls. Secondly, that the conversion of garage to habitable space, requiring a waiver for 2 parking stalls as developed and operated, will not adversely affect the neighborhood, as the site is removed from commercial corridors and high traffic streets. Further, while there is not enough driveway length to incorporate 4 standard parking stalls, there is 34.3 feet of driveway length, which is sufficient for 2 vehicles of above average length to park in tandem on each side of the driveway without blocking the sidewalk. Third, that there will be no nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians created by the conversion of garage to habitable space, requiring a waiver for 2 parking stalls because there is not enough driveway length to incorporate 4 standard parking stalls. There is 34.3 feet of driveway length, which is sufficient for 2 vehicles of above average length to park in tandem on each side of the driveway length without blocking the sidewalk or parking at the curb at the front of the house where there is a significant curve. Fourth, that access to the site over streets is appropriate for the vehicles and numbers for the types and numbers of vehicles involved in the conversion of garage to habitable space, requiring a waiver for 2 parking stalls, as the proposed scope of work is minimal and internal. And lastly, that literal compliance is impracticable due to the nature of the use or the size, location, width, depth, shape, or grade of the lot, or that such exceptions would be in the public interest or in the interest of safety or protection of environmental features, as the lot is undersized at 5,101 square feet and features a steep grade that makes expanding the driveway impracticable, and expanding the existing 2-family dwelling otherwise would require additional zoning relief. The proposed conditions plans are just binding for the plot plan. No building permit will be issued until a copy of the council order is certified and submitted with the Middlesex South Registry of Deeds, and planning signs off that the plans do match from what was submitted and approved at the special permit hearing. And lastly, no certificate of occupancy until it is ensured that the plans match, including the as-built, and that a statement of compliance with condition 1 is provided.
Thank you, Mr. Iadonisi. Counselor Lobovitz.
So I'm a little bit confused because my understanding was that the size of the driveway is only big enough for 2 cars, and yet you said that if they had 4 cars or even 3 cars, it's long enough that it wouldn't overlap onto the sidewalk. So my question is, why even say that if we're not allowing 3 or 4 cars? Because by saying that, you're sort of giving a green light to allow parking in those additional 2 spaces. So could you clarify that, please?
Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, certainly. So 19 feet is a little bit larger than most cities and towns in the area do allow. So most average, below average, or even slightly above average vehicles can fit back to back, in tandem that way. We will absolutely caution the petitioners that if they do not park close enough, there isn't a ton of room for error, or if they do have above average sized vehicles parking there, even if it's guests, then they are subject to parking regulations and zoning violations, potentially if they do anything to block that sidewalk or violate any street parking regulations. So that is kind of the catch with assuming that this would be they stay with their one vehicle or their tenant has another vehicle, even if they do at some time park those 4 vehicles there, they'll still be ticketed, fined, and receive other actions from the city potentially if they do not
I understand.
keep the sidewalk.
I can
But
clarify.
no, I'd
some-
like to speak a little more to this.
I don't think you're necessarily done. Ms.
Right.
Sorry, I just wanted to acknowledge, I think Mr. Iadanesi is right that Newton's standards are pretty generous for standard size parking stalls. I think we can further work on the findings because the expectation is that only 2 stalls, would be parked there because 2 are being waived. I think in reality, if they can accommodate, that is likely to happen, in the real world. But I think, it shouldn't be in the findings.
I understand. We are talking about Newton rules, no other rules. And I would prefer that be completely removed because I think it does give a sign of a green light to additional parking, which we don't allow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
So will the conditions reflect that and just strike
Yeah, we'll
any mention
alter
of the 2
findings,
additionals?
And we'll point more to the topography of the site and the challenges with that.
Perfect. That is what we're about to approve. Did you have your hand up again, Councilor Leary?
Yes, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank Councilor Lobovitz for that comment because I did also find it was a little bit inconsistent. I will say that you see people parking cars in their front setbacks and on their lawns all the time. I sometimes do a request for zoning enforcement when I see that, when I'm on my walks. I also know that if you packed 4 cars in there, there would be no space for other things to do. I find this in my own driveway. I have, other cars, it's a tandem driveway, and it takes up a lot of space that you'd rather use for something else. That's another thing to think about. But I do think we should stick with the 2 cars. Thank you.
That seems like a clear indication from the committee, so thank you both for raising it. Any other comments, or we can, yes, Councilor Farrell?
Thank you, Chair. Not to drag this on, but we have in fact not allowed other people to have less than 19 feet. And I don't think we should be allowing this and making the police enforce it. The police have other things to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Farrell. Any other comments? We'll move on to voting on this. We have a motion to approve by Councilor Leary. Thanks for all the comments. Let's vote.
Counselor Block?
Aye.
Counselor Downs?
Aye.
Counselor Farrell?
No.
Counselor Kelly?
Aye.
Counselor Leary?
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz?
Aye.
Counselor Lucas?
Aye.
Counselor Laredo?
Aye.
Motion passes.
There we go.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice night.
We think we're done with this one. Okay, moving on to the next two items, which are separate items, though of course they're related because the site is the same. The first is number 273-24, which is a request to rezone 2 parcels to multi-residence 1. We'll take the other item separately. First, we'll talk about the rezoning. Ms. Wewell?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The memo presents a complete analysis. In this case, we recommend the committee pay particular attention to revised materials around parking, landscaping, grading, and retaining walls, as well as the updated and revised engineering memorandum. We also wanted to take the opportunity to correct 2 of the parking stalls were miscategorized as tandem stalls that are along the driveway. These are, in fact, parallel parking stalls and require relief for being undersized. There are, however, 8 tandem stalls further into the property. So we would like to turn it back over to the chair, and Ms. Kemet and I are happy to pull up any plans through the permitting portal and answer any questions following the petitioner's presentation. And we are also prepared to share the draft council orders if and when the time is appropriate.
Thank you, Ms. Wewell. I'm going to correct myself and hopefully remove some confusion I just added to. These are 2 separate docket items with 2 separate docket numbers. One is about rezoning, one is about a special permit, but we are discussing them at the same time, which is much of what Ms. Wewell was just talking about. The second item on the record is number 274-24, which is the request to allow 6 attached single-family dwellings in 3 buildings and associated parking waivers at 329-331 River Street and 335 River Street. So we can talk about both at the same time. Again, thank you, Ms. Wewell, and I see the representative for the petitioner is here, Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, for the record, my name is Terry Morris, and I'm an attorney representing the owners of the property who are with me this evening, Mr. Alex Kogan and Mr. Alec Polnareff. If we could share the screen, that would be
Go ahead.
helpful.
You have been given permission.
Thank you. So here we have our presentation. The first slide you see basically was since the last meeting, there were a number of issues that were raised, and we thought it would be quite useful at this discussion to have identified them in advance and then proceed through them in a logical order. The first one, of course, as the chair has pointed out, is the request for a zone change, followed by issues retaining walls, grade change factors, and various other things that we will point out as we go. With regard to the zone change, first slide, please, proposed transitional zone. When we first looked at the development of this parcel, then we were dealing with one of the 2 properties here, which was an existing non-conforming 2-family dwelling. And that was basically the property that was located, one of the lots that was located between the single residence 3 district and the business zone district. We thought it was logical to choose the multi-residence 1 zoning district because it represents a logical transition between business 2 on the west and the single residence 3 on the north and east. It's also consistent with the sequential continuum of zoning classification. As you know, residential zoning is classified according to degrees of lot size and so forth. And the next available district, available single residence 3 is of course multi-residence zoning. And that is because it allows by special permit attached dwellings, single family attached dwellings, which was one of the reasons we chose this district because they represent appropriate transition from single family detached to the business on the other side. And of course, they are allowed by special permit. With respect to the zone change itself, the Planning and Development Board actually took this up on August 5th and recommends the approval of the proposed zone change. At that meeting, and I was in attendance at that meeting, several of the members talked about this issue of spot zoning, which has been raised. And one of the members, Amy Dane, I believe, went into quite an eloquent extrapolation of the reasons why this was not spot zoning. And I think that was one of the determining factors in the planning board recommending the proposed zone change. Now, the issue has come up. I know that Councilor Block has raised the issue with me personally and probably with others people as well. There are people who don't like the idea of simply zoning changes in the context of development. But I think the other approach is that if you're going to zone change, or you change the zone of land, you want to know what's going to go there. You're not going to just, and I think the planning department's memorandum deals with this quite well when they talked about, they say the city has adopted policies that facilitate transitional change in certain areas of the city. So it's not that we're actually recreating the wheel here. And they point to various overlay districts, the Needham Street Vision Plan, and so forth. In the absence of a location-specific policy, such as what this is, regulating transition, much of the gradual change in the city takes place on a parcel-by-parcel basis over time, which is not uncommon for municipalities. The city's comprehensive permit at plan states actually, and it deals with things that the committee is most familiar with, such as the rezoning of Washington Street to facilitate denser zoning and the adoption of the most recent changes to create the village center overlay districts. But there were petitions that were approved with zone change to, in the context of a particular proposal. The background for this, again, which is cited in the memo, says that there are nearby parcels zoned MR1 on Lexington Street, and that the area itself features a mix of zoning districts and land uses, with businesses use zoning to the west and single residence to the north and east. Finally, it says that in all residential zones, a special permit's required regardless to allow single-family attached. The requested change of zoning from SR3 to MR1 allows for a more diverse number and size of units overall. For those reasons, we come back and basically that's the reason why we propose the zone change. Is that where, am I supposed to continue on now into the special permit? I'm not.
It's up to you how you want to do it.
Yes, I think it makes sense. Thank you.
Yes.
The first issue on the second issue after the zone change, of course, one of the issues was raised at the last hearing was the question of retaining walls. The retaining walls are necessary due to the topography. The topography here, as you will see in a later slide, rises. There's an 11-foot grade change from the back of sidewalk to the back of this lot, and the lot continues to proceed upward to the neighborhood behind. There was an issue initially when we first proposed this, having almost the entire site encased in retaining walls, which was quickly abandoned because at the request of the engineering division, it was actually contrary to impeding the natural flow of water. All of the retaining walls that are left on the site are actually less than 4 feet, and most of them are below 3 feet. As the retaining walls, for example, that abut the houses on the back of James Street, as you get further from the back of sidewalk, the retaining walls graduate down to virtually nothing, to intersect with ground level. The next item that we had, of course, was the proposed grade change factors. There has been a grade change on this site, obviously, and there were requests, as the planning department memo points out, that there were requests for profiles, which we did provide, but there were factors that impacted the change of grade here. As I mentioned, the first, of course, the natural grade increase from the sidewalk to the rear of the lot. There's also the seasonal high groundwater elevation. And one of the important things was the city, in 2022, the city created a new stormwater management ordinance that requires developers and residents to install stormwater, and I'm actually quoting from the documentation, the prefatory documentation to the ordinance in the regulations, to install control devices on all new buildings. The new ordinance is designed to make sure that any new development keeps rainwater on its own property. And often this means that a new building must include underground infiltration systems and bioretention basins, which, as you see, as we will proceed with our presentation, we have incorporated both. The building placement, the original house that was sitting on the site was actually set back 16 feet from the street. We have actually, in compliance with the requirement for a 25-foot setback, we have located our buildings 25 feet back from the street. The higher you get up on this site, obviously, the higher the buildings will be situated. The proposed grade changes that we were requested to show some proposed grade changes. You see there, we have presented 2 slides, which I trust that the members of the committee have been able to look at. In the interest of giving people more time than simply looking at them for the first time tonight, I did send copies of this presentation to all of the members late last week, as soon as we had received the Planning Department memo, so that you would have an opportunity to analyze these. The Planning Department does talk about, and it says that the most significant grading work is near the front portion of the site, as is illustrated on these graphs. And that is because if one goes to the civil plan, we want to show, we did install, you see the structures there locating at the back, just the back of sidewalk. One of the biggest reasons why there's a 3-foot retaining wall on the back of sidewalk is because, first of all, east and west of that common driveway, there's the retention chambers that are meant to control the flow of water on the site in compliance with the new stormwater ordinance. The next factor is drainage and stormwater. The project team spent considerable time and effort in meeting with the associate engineer, Mr. John Daglian, in an effort to make sure that we got a clean bit of health here for this project and address any concerns that had been raised at the initial hearing with regard to drainage and stormwater. You can see one of the existing things is that the site currently has no stormwater management controls. Mr. Daglian, in the Planning Department, actually has cited it, several things that Mr. Daglian has pointed out, which are up there on the screen. The engineer of record says has designed a stormwater collection system in accordance with the city's stormwater ordinance. The proposed system, which includes rain gardens, these are the biosystems that we had most recently incorporated into the site plan. Rain gardens, stormwater collection, and infiltration systems that will greatly improve both water quality and quantity coming off the site in conformance with the ordinance. And then it calls out, in fact, the redesign of the 2 rain gardens to collect the natural sheet flow from the rear yard of number 22 and 12 James Street allows the runoff to infiltrate, which we think is a very important point in our plans. Next fact slide, please. Parking options. As you know, you may recall, we started this odyssey with a neighborhood meeting. And one of the results of that neighborhood meeting very early on was their concern about having people, providing enough parking on site so that people would not be trying to park on River Street, which, as anyone knows, is practically impossible given the width of the street and the volume of traffic. And so the first thing we did was to, in addition to providing 2 parking spaces per unit, we provided, you can see, 4 visitors parking spaces located in the center of the lot. And they are indeed tandem. That is one of the reliefs that we are seeking. Because they are tandem, we attempted to basically try to eliminate as much hardscape as possible, and that's one reason why we asked for a waiver of the requirement to have the parking stalls be 19 feet deep. I was pleased to hear Mr. Iadonisi in his previous presentation talk about how the standard, the 19-foot standard in Newton, is actually excessive compared to other municipalities. It's a point that committee members may know I've been trying to make that for some time, and we did incorporate in this again. In conjunction with that, I know you've received a communication from at least one of the abutter who raised the issue of snow removal and snow capacity. We actually have turned these visitor spaces can be, in the wintertime can be, and because this is a condominium, can be regulated for the benefit of the community here. We will provide, and it's highlighted there on the screen, you see bubbled, the snow storage capacity exists on either side of those tandem spaces, because the visitor spaces would not be utilized at that time if in cases of extreme snowfall, but we would be able to use that area as well as the green space beyond that with more than enough capacity to entertain snowfalls of the nature that we have been getting in the last 5 years. We are providing, but one thing to call out as we have the parking offsets, in addition to parking spaces, all of those parking spaces are going to be impermeable. We will be providing the parking spaces identified by grass blocks. All other pavers on the site are going to be permeable. Next option, please. Landscape plan. You can see that we have replacement trees that have all been approved by the tree warden. There are 60-plus evergreen trees, and they are called out on the, you can actually go to the legend. If you show the legend, it might be easier to point out and blow that up. There's a 45 arborvitaes and green giants, which are identified on the plan. Question was posed to me, well, where are they planted? If we go to the plan, you will see those are largely planted along the perimeter, and you can see there's basically a dense growth all along the perimeter that separates us from the backyards of the houses on James Street, not only to afford greater privacy for people on either side of the line, but also to provide a significant green buffer from this project to the balance of the neighborhood. Now, next screen. We, of course, were asked to provide. I'm always very leery about raising the issue of what can be done as a matter of right, because sometimes people take that as some veiled threat. We're not certainly making that. We were asked to prevent. This is the by right option. It's particularly important to note that the emphasis of this committee over the last several sessions has been on smaller units. Our units are approximately 2,200 square feet. That includes the garages. The actual living space is below 1,900. And that's what we are proposing, as opposed to by right large houses, given the FAR that's available to these sites if it were to be subdivided into 2 by right lots. That would result in a by right 2 large houses of 5,420 square feet, which includes 3-car garages. In addition, as you know, the lot coverage requirements are more forgiving in by right single-family homes. There is a 30% lot coverage versus the 25% that accompanies the attached dwelling provisions in the ordinance. And of course, we are at 24.5%. A by right lot coverage could be as great as 30% by right. With respect to the retaining walls and the elevation of the homes, there would be no change. Basically, the homes will be situated in to the same degree and height as they would the proposed buildings, and the retaining walls, of course, would be also unchanged. Lastly, I think we want to present the Urban Design Commission. This was a project that, as you know, many projects of this nature go through the Urban Design Commission, and they particularly noteworthy to point out what you see on the screen. When they talked about the building massing, height, and architecture, there were some of the comments that were quoted from the report. It was that they said it was a great idea and concept. The architecture was appropriate to the area. They appreciated the design, and the elevations were well executed. Good prototype for this kind of development. Again, these are the comments of the Design Commission. Site plan circulation and connectivity. Siting and arrangement of the units creates connectivity and a sense of community, an enclave of neighbors. And then lastly, they pointed out that the landscape streetscape. Deciduous canopy trees help make it part of the streetscape and shade some of the pavement. The grass blocks parking spaces differentiate from the asphalt, and pavers to break up the driveway. And it is a nice transition. We come now full circle, where we started this request for a zone change because we said it was a transitional zone. and it's summed up here where they say it's a nice transition from commercial to single-family homes. That concludes our formal presentation. I hope we didn't take too much of your time, but we appreciate the opportunity to go into detail because we did, as I said, spend a lot of time in the intervening time since we were last here to try to work out and address all of the concerns that have been expressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. We appreciated having you outline the changes and updates and responses to some of the questions we asked before. Let's see if there are any members of the public who would like to speak on this. Yes, I see a hand. M. Ward.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. My name is Margaret Ward and I live at 957 Washington Street. And if it's okay, I'd rather not turn on the the camera because I'm sick in bed. So trust me, you don't want to see me. So anyways, I wanted to comment specifically with regard to the petition 273-74 to rezone. I don't care about the design plans or what changes have been made, etc. Because looking at the heart of the matter here, it's not a development proposal, but a request to change our residential zoning code. In reading the background portion of the planning's memo, I have an issue in two areas. The first is I'm disappointed in what I see as extremely vague, if not deceptive language. And by that, I mean, they talk about zoning changes in plurality. Not all zoning requests are the same. We're not talking about a petition changing the zoning from, for example, like a commercial only to mixed use. That's the kind of zoning that we would like to see, which is good. It applies to principles of smart growth, walkability, etc. But that's not this development proposal. It's not near any significant commercial district, nor is it near public transportation. Also, it's not the role of the planning department to envision, suggest, or enable the creation of transitional zoning that is outside of what has already been established through VCOD, Needham Street Vision Plan, and Washington Street Vision Plan, etc. That's not the role in government. And let's be honest, there's been so much effort over the last year and a half in defining our VCOD. Historically speaking, I'm pretty sure there's only been one rezoning change from SR to MR, and that was for the Walker Center, which if you looked at the merits of it, it served a benefit to the community, unlike this proposal. So I think there's a reason why we haven't seen any spot rezoning requests in residential area. And dare I say it's because we recognize the sanctity of our residential zoning code. I mean, I don't know if this developer is a local resident, but I'm pretty sure he wouldn't want this rezoning proposal down the street from where he lives. In conclusion, if we look at the end goal of this petition, it is nothing more than to densify. If we look at the petition, it's nothing more than densifying a residential neighborhood for the profit of a developer. And residents should have the right to protect the landscape of our neighborhoods. The approval of the zoning request would set a horrible precedent. I would like to ask this committee to look at this proposal in this context and vote no on this petition. The developer should build by right as allowed in our current zoning code for SR3. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. Mr. Uriarty. You're muted.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, Fran Uriarty. I live on 15 Oak Ave, but I actually grew up on River Street, and my family still lives there for the last 100 years. I think the last speaker was perfect. I mean, she said it all. You know, personally, I'm not in favor of this zoning. I think the leaders elected by the Newton voters should decide our zoning laws, not the planning department staff, and not what other municipalities are doing. You know, we don't want to become the next Cambridge or Somerville. It's just not what people move to Newton for. I'm concerned that if this is approved, we'll be setting a precedent for other developers to follow. And we've seen this not just here, we saw it in Nonantum, the same thing, when VC development was shut down and then they wanted to spot zone over there. So I understand on occasion we need to tweak the zoning ordinance to allow developments. Such things as like a waiver or a setback or a parking space length, like you talked about earlier, those are small changes that fit within the neighborhood. However, we should not be allowing massive changes such as this simply so the developer can make money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Uriarty. I wonder, because now 3 people have used the term spot zoning, well, as we talk about this petition, if planning and/or law might like to give us a take on that. It's a terminology that's being used a lot. The petitioner's attorney referred to other people who had written about it, but he didn't explain what that was. Would you folks be willing to do a quick discussion about that now before we move further?
Sure, I'm not sure how much discussion it warrants. Spot zoning is very rare, and it's really somewhat of a misnomer. It is completely reasonable and appropriate and legal to zone a specific parcel, a specific zone for a specific project. It's done frequently here in Newton. As long as this city council in its legislative capacity finds that there is a valid public purpose for the rezoning, it is permitted.
Thank you, Mr. Temple. Does planning want to add anything to the comments made about planning setting the zoning?
No, oh, I'm so sorry. I was questioning the statement, but I believe the members of the public may be referring to the planning board and not the planning department.
I'm not sure.
Who, yeah, the
Ms. Ward mentioned that, Margaret Ward. I don't know. I would like to clarify that I don't see our planning department, particularly vis-a-vis this proposal, trying to change the zoning. What's happening is there was a request for a special permit by a petitioner to do that. This is not coming from the planning department. It's actually not coming from the planning board, but we should be clear about the terms that we're all using here. Do we need to take it into the committee, or are we still? Yeah, thank you. Mr. Uriarty, you did already speak, but I don't see any hands up. Do you have something more to say?
Just that, I mean, I don't know if the right terminology is spot zoning, but changing the zoning for that spot, whatever you want to call it. And I can tell you without a doubt that the planning department has been recommending spot zoning. They did it down in Nonantum at Mueller's Barbershop. When Mr. Mueller came forward with VC2 zoning, I said, "What are you doing, John? The whole neighborhood just turned this down." He said, "That's what the planning department told me to do." So it is happening. I hope it's not on this side as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Uriarty. Any other members of the public with questions or comments? I don't see any right now, but certainly raise your hand if... Oh, Tim Feinstein? I see it, Pam. I got it. Mr. Feinstein,
Hi.
go ahead.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, give us your address, please.
Sure. I live on 49 Washburn Avenue in Auburndale. I want to speak on this as well. I'm a longtime Newton resident. My 2 boys go to the Burr School. And I pass this intersection quite a bit when biking and also when driving. The Burr School has had reduced attendance. It had 400 kids around 2017. In 2023, it had 350 kids. I like the idea that instead of 2 houses, we'll have 6 smaller houses that appear to be more affordable than what could be built by right. And I think it's great for the neighborhood, actually, and it's in the best interest of the city. I've heard some objections. I understand that change can be hard, but from what I'm seeing, I think this injects life into the city, into the neighborhood. It's a great proposal. It looks like a very thought out project. And I hope that we don't allow arbitrary concerns to get in the way of common sense and making the city better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Feinstein. If there are other members of the public and it occurs to you, do just raise your little virtual hand at the bottom of the screen and we'll call on you. Right now, we'll take it into the committee and with other counselors to speak also. First, Councilor Lobovitz.
I have a number of questions, actually. There was some concern about the turning angle of cars coming into the property. Could someone comment on that? Was there a waiver on that one?
There were questions about the turning radii. I believe they were answered. Mr. Morris, would you like to address that or planning?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have slides on that. We have slides on it.
You share them?
Those were requested and submitted to planning staff in conjunction with the review of our petition.
I remember seeing that in the packet. Councilor Lobovitz, did you have specific questions about where or what the radii has been changed to or the proof that it is adequate? Or is just the fact that it has been submitted and reviewed an okay answer?
Number one is, was there a waiver required? And if so, what was the reason for the recommendation of the waiver from the planning department?
The only waiver would have been for backup aisle distance, and we did not request that because it's not necessary.
Okay. Thank you.
Not deemed necessary is
Have
what
the
I'm
necessary backup aisle with between the spaces, I think.
I have 3 more questions if you don't mind.
No, absolutely. You have the floor.
There was also some concern about emergency vehicle access. Could somebody comment on that?
We used a common technique in developments of this size that the hardscape paved area is 12 feet wide, but the 4-foot walkway, which is adjacent, it provides a 16-foot wide travel path, which has been routinely accepted by the fire department as adequate access to and from the site.
Okay.
Plus, these units are sprinkled, and we have a hydrant located at the rear of the site.
My third question is, as I also understand it, there's a parking waiver to allow cars parked right next to the building, no space between the building and the parked car. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, Councilor Lobovitz, and those cars actually, they're shown on the spaces are shown on the plan.
So I have a question about why there is that rule at all before I can think about whether that waiver should be granted. Could somebody comment on the need for why there should be ideally space between a car and a building?
I don't have an exact answer, but I think we suspect that perhaps it's to allow enough room for a door to open next to the building. But
Is there a safety issue also? Because I've heard concern that if there's a fire in the car, having space between the car and the building adds protection to the building.
no, yeah, I'm not sure of the nature of that rule or the origin, so I don't have a great answer for you, but, I'm kind of looking back to Jen here, and we don't suspect there's any, sort of safety issue with that either.
I've just read that there are safety issues when we consider that issue.
Could I just step in to clarify the question? What I thought the waiver was for is parking a vehicle within 5 feet of the building.
That's right.
So what is the distance? Are you 2 feet from the building, or 1 foot from the building, or 4.5 feet from the building, or how close? And is there room for the door to open?
The required parking space is 9 feet wide, and
Can't tell on this by dimensioning then
I mean,
how far from the car to the building.
I would simply point out that that condition exists throughout many of the older areas of the city. And so it's not an unusual condition that exists currently in the city. That
I think Councilor Lobovitz is raising it as a potential safety issue, being
Yeah.
able to have enough room,
I don't
open the
care
door. I'm just
whether the
wondering
door
how
can
far it
open or
really
not.
is.
Correct. I don't care whether the door can open or not. That's up to the people who own the car and the building. I am concerned about the safety, and I would want some clarification on that. So my last question is also there's a waiver on the lighting requirement. Could somebody comment on that, and why is there a lighting requirement, and why would we waive it?
And
Thank you.
how often is it waived for projects like this? Planning, would you like to address
Yes,
that quickly?
So when looking at the site plan in its entirety, we have provisions in the ordinance regarding parking facilities for fewer than 5 stalls and then 5 or more, I believe. This was treated as a parking facility with 5 or more parking stalls, so it triggered a bunch of additional relief because of the number of parking stalls and the configuration of which they are in, kind of on that same surface facility. So that is where the lighting requirement comes from. We do see it frequently waived. I think we, recognize that the 1-foot candle minimum is probably higher than desired in a residential area, so it's sort of counterintuitive, but it is sort of traditionally or frequently waived with these types of projects.
What was the reason for the requirement, so I can understand whether a waiver is reasonable?
Yeah, well, it's meant to apply to much larger parking facilities. I think just because this one has more than 5 stalls, it's sort of in that territory, but, envision large parking lots that require, perimeter and interior landscaping also come along with lighting requirements. So it's sort of being applied at a lesser level than perhaps intended.
Thank you. That's
Councilor
all.
Lobovitz, I'll just
all my
speak in
questions.
layman's terms about this. This requirement, when it hits that threshold, almost treats the project like a commercial project. And the intensity and the lumens of the light is often excessive, particularly from the point of view of neighbors. So we'll see very often a request to waive this because it's just excessive, too bright, too many lights, all of that. And I think that's what's happening here.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Councilor Laredo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Attorney Temple, I appreciate your legal definition of spot zoning, which, as I understand it, Attorney Temple, as I understand it, if there's a public benefit to the proposed rezoning, that can avoid the spot zoning designation. Is that your belief?
That's correct.
All right, so here's my conundrum with this. Let's say we took 4 parcels of land all next to one another, say along River Street, and we rezoned one to manufacturing, a second to business 2, a third to MR1, and the fourth stayed at SR3. Doesn't that really run afoul of our whole desire under the zoning concept to have some level of uniformity rather than essentially change the zone as one chooses to just because a particular landowner or developer requests it?
Sure, I think you're kind of talking about 2 different things, though. From a planning perspective, I believe that certainly would be disfavored legally if you could articulate a valid reason for doing that. And I'm not saying you can or what it would be, but if for some reason there was, it could be defensible.
I mean, the problem I'm struggling with this, okay? The problem I'm having is when you have uniformity in an area, and you have a particular developer who comes in and says, well, I want the zoning rules to be different for me than every other rule in that area, even if it's legal under the spot zoning analysis, why is that good public policy?
I don't think I could, that's more of a planning question. Is it good planning policy or not is a different question than is it
Well, then
legal?
it's a question from Ms. Wewell. Why is that good public policy?
So I think in looking at this area, there is not a ton of uniformity. You know, the parcel that this would be adjacent to is in a business zone, and then on the other side are single residence zones, and, you know, kind of diagonally across Lexington are also multi-resident zones. So we certainly consider that as well, and it would, you know, allow for the creation of new housing units, but like I said, it's subjective as to what good policy is, and I think that's up to the committee to decide.
So can I just follow up on that a little bit? And I'm struggling with this, so I'm appreciative of both of your comments. I took a look at the assessor's database. I took a look at the zoning map a little bit. If I had to look at the 3 properties on either side of the parcels in question and the parcels directly across the street, would I see different zones? I'm not interested in what may be down the street 10 or 12 or 15 units away. I'm talking about right next to it.
Sorry, these are the 2 parcels which are proposed to be rezoned, I think 335 and the 329-331.
Right.
So you can see that directly adjacent are business zones at 339 and 56-58 Lexington. Directly across is still single residence 3, as well as to the rear and northeast of the site. But, you know, when focusing on this intersection, my observations are that, you know, the 4 corners are entirely within business zones, but you also have additional multi-residence 2 zones along here, not too far away.
But again, Ms. Wewell, I'm just trying to focus. Immediately adjacent to the parcels in question, are those SR3?
To the left, no, it's business, but to the right, yes.
Okay. And so, and elsewhere on River Street, across the street, are those SR3 as well?
That's correct.
Okay.
There's a little bit across from 335 that is
All right.
also
All right.
business.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the additional information.
Of course.
Is that it for you right now, President Loredo? All set for now? Councilor Wright, I did see your hand next, but I usually take the committee first, but I will come to you first as soon as we're done with the committee. I will get to you folks in a minute. Right now, we have Councilor Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking quickly at spot zoning, and refers to the practice of applying different zoning laws to a specific piece of land that other than the surrounding area. That seems to be a very broad definition, but really for me, I always think of spot zoning as sort of a pejorative term. And because my conundrum here is that because we really need to embark on a comprehensive residential zoning reform, which is a very big project, we're forced into a conundrum where we don't like to see what can be built by right, in this case, 2 very large single-family homes. And we often have to be very, careful about not only the neighborhood, but also some of the goals of the city. One of the members of the public did speak about 6 smaller units and the fact that our schools are dropping, our enrollment's dropping because so many young families can't afford to live in Newton anymore. So I'm very cognizant of that. So for me, it's really a balance. But I am, I'm not crazy about the idea of changing the zoning so abruptly in a neighborhood. I would rather have a plan to do it. And I am cognizant of some increased density is not always welcomed, and it always brings more cars. However, I do want to try and get to a yes on this project. I think there's some real benefits to it. My questions are, I'm always wary about the retaining walls regarding concerns about pooling water. We've seen this in other projects. Not only, so the retaining walls can break up the flow of water from the other properties that move downhill and cause some pooling. So I'd like to address that with this project. I had a question about how those 4 guest parking spaces were going to be managed. Some of those questions were brought up in terms of how they could turn to be areas for snow, if we get snow anymore. But it's going to be a condo association, so I don't know whether there will remain guest parking spaces or will they end up being permanent spaces. Just a question. Let's see, what was my other question here? I would like to see the architectural renderings of these proposed buildings in context with the neighbors. I just want to have a better idea of the height and massing and how close it would be to some of the residential homes. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Leary. Councillor Block, we'll come back to you also because I think at the end some kind of motion will be coming from you as this is your ward, but you have your hand up now too, so go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm aware that this is in my ward. I know this neighborhood very well. I appreciate all of the comments from the public and from the petitioner and from my colleagues regarding zoning. I do think that when this committee receives a simultaneous zoning request and a special permit, first of all, it's unusual. And when it happens, in my opinion, it puts this committee in a very awkward position. And the awkward position is that we are not the zoning and planning committee. We are the land use committee. And nearly all of our work is in that context. And in that context, we take a quasi-judicial role, which is very different from the legislative role that we take on when we consider zoning changes. And simply because this is both of these items are coming to us simultaneously, that does not magically make us the best place to talk about zoning changes. So I'm very uncomfortable not having the Zoning and Planning Committee's expertise applied to this. I appreciate that our rule, the City Council's rule, has it go to us simultaneously. That does not change my feelings about this. I would like to know what Zoning and Planning thinks, and if they want to just come to our committee meetings and participate that way, that would be fine. I think it would be better for us to suspend our rules and give them a formal opportunity to consider this. That would be my preference. And I realize that would require us to hold this item and to work out an arrangement with ZAP, with the president of the council, to figure out the best way to do that. But I think this is a really important principle. This is not going to be the last time that we get 2 matters like this sent to us simultaneously, and I think we have to really decide how we want to handle it. The second thing I want to say is that in the context of acting in our quasi-judicial capacity, I'll just speak for myself. I need to know what the zone is. It can't be, it might be changed by the City Council. I need to know what it is in order to act in the quasi-judicial way and make the determinations that we are required to make. And the only zone that I know is the current zone. And this special permit is incompatible with the current zone. So as of today, I can't vote for this special permit. I can only consider it when the zone is changed. And only the City Council can make that. We can't as a committee. We can talk about it, we can make our recommendations, But I think there's a conflict here between our quasi-judicial role and the way in which we're handling this. So I'm sorry to bring up what are mostly procedural matters, but I think there are principles embedded in them that we need to think about very carefully. And that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Councilor Block. All I can say procedurally and with our current rules is that that's why we do separate the two items and vote on the zone change first. So by the time you vote on the special permit, you do know what the recommended zone will be. And you're right, we only make a recommendation. We're 8 people. What we vote tonight is not necessarily what's going to pass at full
Thanks for
city
adding
council.
that. I appreciate that.
I see too, we have another member of the public or two whose hands are up. So Ms. Belville?
Thank you. Mary Lee Belville, 136 Warren Street in Newton Center. I'm struck by a couple of things, and it goes back to what's in the public interest. 2,200 square feet condominiums are by no stretch of the imagination affordable housing. 2 parking spaces per unit plus 4 visitor parking spaces are not in any way aligned with where this city is going. So I struggle to understand why this would even be entertained, since it's just asking for so many variations from whether it's the spot zoning or the current zoning. I struggle to understand why this is even on the table, because I see no benefit to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Melville. I don't know the name of the next person. It says no on resident. Excuse me. Could you just give us your name and address, please?
My name is Carolyn Kraft, and I live at 295 Dudley Road. And my concern is, having watched this, I need a little bit of clarity on the role of the planners, the city planners, to do this. Are they the ones responsible in creating the idea to the developer when it comes to spot zoning, rezoning? Where does that come from?
Ms. Belville, are you asking the planning department if they create oh, sorry, Ms. Kraft. Yeah, not Ms. Belville. We've moved beyond her. Sorry about that. Ms. Kraft, you're asking the planning department if they create the idea to change the zone of this? Is that the question?
I want to know where, what my curiosity is, what is the role of the city planners? And is it my concern is, are they stepping out of their role to initiate more of an ideal zoning of what they'd like to see of the city, regardless of what the residents and our city councilors have decided?
Thank you. Our Deputy Director, Jen Cairo, would like to answer your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Planning Department's role is to provide technical analysis and guidance to the City Council. We do not put forth proposals for developments, nor do we put forth proposals for the rezoning that is necessary for a new development. The petitioner files an application for a development and with the corresponding rezoning that they have assessed that they would need in order to build their project. Our role is purely advisory.
Ms. Kraft, does that answer your question? I'm assuming it did because it was clear.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here. It isn't clear to me because they're advising, but what are the parameters to their advising, initiating, and realizing that this is out of the realm of what the zoning was agreed upon?
What I heard Ms. Kyra say is that they respond to the request by the city council, which is initiated by the land use committee, for input on specific petitions that are filed on behalf of a petitioner. In this case, we've heard from the attorney for the petitioner. That is the team that requested this. It didn't come from zoning, is how come from planning, is how I understand this. Ms. Kyra, is that in
That is
alliance with what you
correct.
think?
Well, okay, it's interesting because what I heard from Fram Urardi was that the barber was told by planning that they could do something. So that's sort of different. That's a different role is what you're telling me.
Go ahead, Ms. Kyra.
So our role in planning is also to provide technical guidance to the applicant. So sometimes they come forward and say, this is what they're proposing to do, and are looking for technical understanding of what zoning district may allow that. It doesn't mean that we are proposing that zoning, it may not even mean that we would be supportive of that rezoning, but we provide that technical information of these are your options. Planning is unable to change zoning, and we are not putting forth zoning for developers associated with a special permit petition.
Ms. Kraft, because there was background noise coming, you were muted, but if you had more to say about this, though, I think Ms. Kyra has done a good job trying to respond to your question. Is there more you need to hear on this, or are you all set?
I hear what she says, but I would like to have more clarity about how engagements are between the city planning department and the way these things evolve, because it seems like there's a question mark to the boundaries, even though it sounds right. I question the intent, and that's all I'd like to say. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I think that is a broader topic that is worth exploring at some point, perhaps not necessarily relevant to our consideration right this moment for this petition. I don't see another hand up from the public. Councillor Lucas.
Oh, no.
Former Councillor Markowitz.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. Well, it's a pleasure to be back with you all. I think this is the first
Nice
time
to see you. We miss you.
Yeah, I wish I was in there. I missed the action. It's definitely the place to be on a Tuesday night. I apologize for being late. I had something else to do this evening. I just want to say a couple things about this. When I first saw this item come before DRT, I said, well, this is going to be interesting because, living a couple blocks away from the site, I noticed the site was having, demolition activity, trees being removed, fencing going up. So I knew something was coming. To me, this goes back to kind of the overall more macro thinking about what do we want to do with zoning. And this sentiment's been, a lot of people have spoken tonight, have said this same thing here. I won't use it as a pejorative, Councilor Leary. I certainly respect that perspective. But I think back when I was in the council and we voted for the village centers, that was a thinking around, a macro kind of consistent application of zoning changes to the city going forward. This feels to me similar to certain other applications we had in past sessions where there was an attempt to rezone multiple parcels, seemingly kind of out of context with what was going on around it. And even though we always said on land use that we don't set precedent, I think it'd be very difficult to grant something like this and then say to the next person on River Street, where there are a number of deep lots, all the way down River, all the way towards Oak, and all those areas where conceivably you could say, hey, look, we could put 4, 5, 6 units in here. Well, if we want to do that, then I think we need to look at the whole area and say, is this something we want to do for that particular part of Auburndale? I'll kind of leave it at that. If it were me, I would move, and I used to get to move these things for Ward 4, I would probably move denial or certainly hold to answer other questions on this. But again, I'll stop short of using the S word. but it does feel a lot like that to me, and I don't understand how in the cosmic scheme of things this makes sense. One other thing to note, there is some other significant development going on in that neighborhood, even though it's not designated, as a VC area. The opposite corner there, across from the restaurant, those 2 or 3 parcels there are being either combined or realigned so that there can be development there, and there will be development there. And there is a fairly significant apartment complex going up on Lexington Street around the corner. So there's a lot going on there now. So I think it really makes sense in light of that to step back and say, does this make sense at this time, or is there another way to configure this to to satisfy all parties? Thank you. It's great to see you all. Rock on.
Thank you, Mr. Markowitz. Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, Chair, and it's good to see our former Councilor Markowitz on Zoom. So we have two docket items in front of us. They are combined together. One is a zone change, the other is a special permit. I'm going to look at them together, but separate, if that makes sense. So I'm going to give everyone some addresses, and these are zone changes by the City Council related to special permits over the last few years, 3 years. 1314 Washington Street, that was the bank in West Newton. That went from business to a MU4. 11 Florence Street, that's in off of Route 9. That's the Winston Flowers. That went from an MR and a BU zone to BU4 to create senior housing. 34 Craft Street in Newtonville behind the Whole Foods, that went from an MR to BU4 for senior housing. We have the Walker Center, someone already mentioned that today. That went from SR to an MR, and we know what's going on there. We had the Riverside, which that's a whole other conversation, but that was also a zone change to MU3. That was in 2021. And then 1149 Walnut Street, that went from a business use zone to MU4 in 2021. All 6 of these sites all have something in common that the one in front of us does not. These 6 projects that I mentioned have an affordable housing component to it in one form or another. The reason I say component, because the project at 34 Craft Street, the senior housing, they are making a cash payment in lieu of providing the affordable housing, which the money will go to the trust and the Newton Housing Authority. I look at those as benefits to the community when they provide affordable housing. This is a zone change from SR to MR, which is going to create 6 very, very expensive townhouse units. My guess is they're going to go for 1.5, 1.6 million, I don't know, something like that. But either way, I don't see a benefit to the city, and I don't see a benefit to the surrounding community to rezone these 2 parcels. That's where I'm at right now. And then when I look at the actual special permit, the development, back in July when we were next door in that small conference room when it was 90 degrees in the shade, the petitioner at that meeting was providing a reasoning as to why they are changing the grade anywhere from 4 to 5 feet in height. I understand why that was, but then I asked a question. I did not hear a reason why they are going up to, I think it was 35.8 or 35.6 feet in height. That is a big building if you're standing on the sidewalk. That is very, very big, and I said those very words a few months ago, back in July. And then when I read the memo that's in front of us right now for this meeting tonight, on page 2, when they give the updates, site layout and building design, overall the site layout and overall architectural design of the buildings remains largely unchanged from what was submitted in July. So there's been no movement on making these units smaller. There's been no there's been no attempt to make the buildings smaller. This project is way, way too big for the site. Combined with the change of zone from SR to MR and the problems with that, I am not going to support the change of zone for this petition, and I am not going to support the special permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. Councillor Farrell.
May I just say amen, brother?
That's it. Talk about brevity. Councillor Downs.
Thank you, Chair. I have one question I'd just like to clarify on. I know there's a 3-foot retaining wall in front at the sidewalk, and then there's some grading, and it's a fair distance back from the street. It's not right up on it, it's certainly within the setbacks. But looking at now that we've had a lesson in how to read plans for grading, how high, that first floor, the end of the foundation, how high up is that on that first building coming back from the sidewalk?
So hold on.
Can someone from planning
Yes.
or the
Ms.
petitioner?
Wewell is
I
getting
just
that
didn't want to make
information.
the same mistake.
I just
with
want to
the
be
microphone.
really sure that we know what we're
She's
talking
pulling that
about.
up for you to answer your question. If you can just hold on a sec.
Okay.
So you can see that the first floor elevation here is 72.5. And I think you asked about what the elevation is at the back of the sidewalk. So this proposed grade is 67, close to the sidewalk, and the top of wall is 66.5 feet. So, it does look to be, about a 6-foot difference from the first floor to that top of that retaining wall.
Can you read that for me again? I cannot read it from
Yeah.
here.
72.5 is the first floor elevation.
72.5, so it's
And
about 6 feet? Is
yes,
that right?
when you take the top of the retaining
From
wall,
the top of the retaining wall. So it's
66.5.
3 feet to the top of the retaining wall plus 6 feet, so 9 feet from the sidewalk. I'm a little concerned about the grading and its appearance from the street. I appreciate the other cross sections which show how it fits into the neighborhood, particularly to the homes in back of it. But I think it will look fairly massive, particularly since we're looking at 2.5 stories over that initial 7 to 10 feet that we're looking at from the sidewalk. And I think that's something that we've learned is hard to have introduced into a neighborhood. I think the parking is more than adequate, but I understand the neighbors' worries about on-street parking and the parking conditions around there. So I'm willing to accept the slightly excessive parking there, particularly since some of it is going to infiltrate. I think that outside of the grading, which does concern me, this brings to the neighborhood a number of things that fit our goals, our comprehensive plan, and meet the moment. We need more housing. We need housing that isn't quite as big as the units that are going in back behind my house, which are, the latest one was a 6-bedroom, 6.5 bath that went for $4 million. So if I look at a $1.5 million townhouse, that looks to me like, in the market raised housing, that looks relatively affordable. The stormwater will be improved there. The by right option is not attractive. And what's there now is, and what was there before, we're always looking is it better than was there before? And I think this would meet that. I'm just concerned about the overall height and the overall grading, given just how tall those foundations are going to be. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councillor Downs. And thanks to our other colleagues who have been waiting out all these other comments. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. To follow on what Councillor Downs was saying, if you actually, not just the top of the wall, but at the bottom of the wall along the sidewalk, it's 63 feet. So we're talking about 9.5 feet to the first floor from the street. Also, it was stated it's a 3-foot wall in the front, but on the side to the right, it's 4 feet. If you take a look what's to the right, the two houses next to it are capes, one-story capes with no retaining walls. So these buildings are going to tower and probably even block their sunlight in the afternoon. A few other things too. And also, which has been brought up, is this whole block, except for right next door, is SR3. And across the street is SR3. What they're proposing for FAR for this, for these builds, and FAR is the volume, the size of the building, basically. And it's 27% bigger than what is allowed in SR3 and 21% bigger than what's MR1. So they're asking for relief, quite a bit of relief on the massing of the buildings there. What they could build here by right is 2 units on each of these lots using our ADU. And shortly we will be updating the ADU so there's no owner occupancy. So they don't have to do a single family unit. They could do 2 units with 1 unit being a little bit smaller than the other and would be a little bit more attainable. And then my last thing I'd like to point out is it appears similar to Clinton Street is we're getting this buildup because the groundwater is high and they have to have it so many feet above the groundwater. There's nothing that says you have a right to a basement and 2.5 stories above that. So if it doesn't work, it could be 1.5 stories, which would reduce the height and reduce the volume. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. And again, thank you for your patience, Councillor Oliver.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, that was a tough act to follow, but I'm going to do my best. So it kind of to address something that Councillor Block requested is a conversation a little bit, from the perspective of zoning and planning. That's one of the committees I sit on. I think it's very interesting, and Ms. Wewell, if you wouldn't mind, if you could pull back up the map that you showed, I believe when Councillor Laredo was asking about the zoning in the area. I think that is the right backdrop for my first comment or two. Thank you, yeah, that one. So I do think that I saw the petitioner make a comment about the change in zone from SR3 to MR made sense because it's a step down from the BU lots on Lexington. Did I misspeak? Some people are giving me a funny look. Nope, good, fine, super. It seems silly to me that the logic that we're being asked to pay attention to here is let's increase the density on these 2 lots. Let's combine them and increase the density so that we can step down to the density of a lot next door. Well, the density on the existing lots is what is next door. That is an argument that holds absolutely zero water for me. It's actually counterintuitive. These lots are appropriately zoned. I'm not a big fan of the mustard yellow color, but I will go as far as to say that mustard yellow color makes sense in this area. MR does not. It does not. I'll go one step further when it comes to the first item, which I believe is the zoning for these two lots. What we're being asked here well, you're being asked as a committee and we're being asked as a council is to not only increase the density, but then to ignore that and go even further. Because what's being proposed for these properties doesn't even conform to MR. It goes beyond that. As Councilor Wright just pointed out, 27% beyond what is allowed in this particular zone that we're being asked to consider here. But thank you for putting that up. I appreciate that, Ms. Wewell. And then I do want to point out just one or two comments about the project itself, because as Councilor Wright pointed out, and Councilor Downs was questioning, the difference in height between the sidewalk directly in front of the building on the front building on the left. If you're standing on that sidewalk, you're standing at an elevation of 63.5 feet, if I'm reading all of my materials correct. The top of that building, the peak of the roof, is at 105 feet. That's 42 plus feet in difference. That's really big. That's really tall. This is a massive structure. We need to learn our lessons, folks. That is a lot bigger than 2.5 stories. It's 2.5 stories set upon a 9-foot tall increase from the sidewalk. That's big. That's not just a 2.5-story building. That's really, really, really tall. And I think that we've also made the point that what could be built by right here, I've already made the point, or Councilor Wright made the point, well, you could keep the lots separate and put, 2 families on each lot, assuming that the second family in each case is an ADU. Well, there's a great idea. I've been on this council for 4 years. That's the kind of development we've been talking about. That's what we have said we want. This doesn't represent anyone's definition on this council that I've ever heard as to what we want. Also, it's entirely possible that even if we were to grant the change of zone, doesn't mean it has to be this configuration by any stretch of the imagination. There could be fewer units, they could be smaller, there could be the same or less amount of parking. There's a lot of opportunity here. This isn't it. If this is the item that comes before the City Council, I have no vote here tonight, but I will then, and I will not support the zone change, and I can't support this project for the reasons I just stated. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Oliver. Anyone else who hasn't spoken? Councilor Malachy.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you, Chair. Councilor Oliver just kind of made the point that struck me when I heard, we'll have a step down from the business to the residential. The residential that would be being stepped down to, they don't need a step down. They've got the buffer already in the units, the single family that is already there. Instead, they would be getting 6 units worth of cars, 12 cars, next to what is really a pretty busy intersection for not being in a village center because of all the traffic from Waltham. I guess a couple of 5,000 square foot houses could be built by right, but I'm not sure that's what anybody would want to do. Basically 2 blocks from Waltham with very large houses, apparently being kind of slow to sell now already. I also heard raised, I guess, from the public that, oh, the school, the Burr School is short on kids. I remember years and years of hearing that we shouldn't not vote for projects because they were going to add kids. So by the same token, I don't think we should be voting for projects because they'll add kids when we're short of kids, because, you know, I've been around long enough to know how cyclical school populations are. And finally, I agree with Councillor Lucas on the lack of a public benefit. I guess there are, you know, quite a few people who think more units for the sake of more units is by definition a public benefit, but I don't subscribe to that philosophy. I guess I would want something extra to say that something was a public benefit. And here we have 6 market rate units, not one of them affordable. If one were affordable, that could, you know, that could be called a public benefit. But just to allow a developer to sort of stuff the maximum number of units that they can without having to do any affordable units, I don't see that as a public benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malachy. I think we've heard from everyone who has something to say. I believe that Councillor Block has a motion or 2 or 3 to make, or 4.
Thank you, Chair. I want to.
I'll get to you in a moment. Let Councillor
I'm
Block
sorry.
speak. No, Councillor Block has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank Councillor Wright and Councillor Oliver from the Zoning and Planning Committee for contributing their comments. I really appreciate it. I realize there are 6 other members of ZAP, and if this were formally referred to ZAP, I'm sure they would consider it thoughtfully. Based on the conversations I've heard here, I think in the interests of kind of moving things along, in addition to moving to close the public hearing, I'd like to move to reject both petitions. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Block has made a motion to close the public hearings and to reject both motions. Before we get to that, Mr. Morris?
I'd like to make one comment, and it's largely about procedure. I respect Councillor Block's articulate description of rationalization for his position. The one thing that struck me in all the discussion about zone change, there was a lot of focus on the law department, the planning department. There was not one word mentioned about the planning board. If we're going to talk about procedure and process, and there was a lot of talk about that, this would have to tell me why the planning board's recommendation in this case was devalued so badly. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. We're going to vote on these things. First, we're going to vote on, yes,
Just have a question in terms of
do you want me to
procedure.
finish my statement, or do you want to ask a question? Go ahead.
I have a question.
Okay.
If, in terms of the vote,
Yes.
if we reject the request to change zone, does that automatically stop the project? It just, how does that relate?
It doesn't automatically, it does work the other way around. We can't approve the project as been requested if the zone change won't come, but they could come back with the same request with a different zone change or with sticking within the zone or something like. Councilor President Laredo, you'd like to?
Just a quick clarification, if I could, Madam Chair. Both votes will be done in committee because the full council could reverse whatever decision this committee makes.
I thought you meant within committee.
I do.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, he's asking about what happens with tonight's votes.
Yes.
So we will be taking them separately. If we approve Councilor Block's motion to deny the first thing, that doesn't automatically mean that the second one is automatically denied also. We'll take a separate vote on that. Is that the understanding of planning and law?
That's correct.
Okay, phew. I like it when I'm right. Um,
A question on process.
Okay,
Under the land use rules, if we reject as a council both the zoning change, but more importantly, the land use petition, does that mean that the petitioners have to come back with an entirely new proposal, or cannot come back before us for a period of time? Is that correct?
you mean if the full council rejects it, not
Yeah.
about tonight's vote?
Yep.
There will be a delay to bring back the exact same project. We'd have to address what proposed changes there would be in the future as to whether or not the council could hear it.
So modest changes to this, for instance, making it 1.5 rather than 2.5 stories, would that count as a new proposal, or would that be the same proposal coming back to us?
It's hard to say. It sounds like from what you're proposing, probably would be a different proposal.
To me,
Even if it would be deemed the same proposal, you still have the ability to override the rule and to hear it anyway as well.
that doesn't sound like it would be a modest proposal, but as we heard earlier tonight, that some of these decisions are subjective, and the planning department looks at many factors before making that determination.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any, Mr. Morris?
Yes, I think in fairness to the time that's been devoted to this, and I appreciate every second, every minute, we should say this, and if this is voted down, then my clients have informed me that they intend to proceed with what they can do by right. I think I owe you that candor before you vote. If that's what you choose, that's fine. I mean, you're in the position, obviously, of evaluating what can be by right versus what special permit. It's not an unknown equation, and I respect your vote. Thank you.
Well, at least you've already done that calculation. Yes, sir, come to the microphone. Are you sure?
I'll say something.
Go ahead. You may. You're the owner.
Hi, Alec Polnareff. I'm one of the owners. I'm a Newton resident. I've been a resident since 2003. My kids go to high schools, elementary schools. It's really disappointing. Me and Alex have put heart and soul into this project. We could have started by right away a year ago. As you can imagine, it cost us a lot of time. I mean, money, of course. It's, again, disappointing to sit here and hear all of you very respectable gentlemen and ladies to make a decision based on something that, I mean, I understand the process, I understand how you make your decisions, but at the same time, I think you also need to look outside of the box. Again, thanks for all your time. We appreciate it. I think it has drawn a lot of juices from us. I'm exhausted. Alex is exhausted. I mean, we put in tremendous amount of time and hours, and as well as working with the zoning committee and the planning board. I mean, Kat Kamet has been very helpful in the whole process, so we really appreciate it. I feel like this time was being wasted, and it's really disappointing. So, thank you.
We can hear you, but we haven't voted yet. Councilor Leary.
Madam Chair, my intention is to abstain on this vote because I am hopeful that there could be some changes made to this project that would be more compatible and more of a compromise with my colleagues. And I agree with somewhat has been said here, including the height, the massing, water issues, and the idea, I have raised this multiple times about how we need to address our zoning more comprehensively, and this is where we find ourselves. And I think there's much agreement on that point. I would really prefer not to see a by right building go in there. It would be my strong preference to see if we could come to some other kind of agreement that would work here. And address some of the concerns that have been raised, which I appreciate and agree with many of them. But I also do understand the impact of a by right project, and more smaller units is preferable to large units as well. So, but it's been a good conversation tonight, but that's why I will be abstaining.
Thank you, Councillor Leary. Okay, I'm going to say a few words. Just to clarify, we are going, I thought I said it, but I'm going to say it again. We're going to take 4 separate votes. For each of the 2 docket items, we're going to vote on the zone change and on the project design. 4 separate votes. For me, I appreciate the effort that Councillor Block is putting into having us think about coordinating more with ZAP on some of these things. And as Councillor Leary points out, perhaps more comprehensive approach to zoning. I don't call it spot zoning, though I understand that there are these site-specific requests that are reasonable to consider. In this case, I will not vote, first of all, I will not vote in favor of closing the public hearing, hoping that we're going to continue these both on hold. That's what I thought you were going to do originally. That is something I would probably support. Otherwise, I will vote against your proposal to deny the zone change, and I will vote against the proposal because, like Councillor Leary, I would like to see us try and get to yes on this. I don't like the prospect of the by right uses. Councillor Wright is right. You could do 2 much smaller by right things, but in my experience, developers don't do that. I don't think that's a reasonable choice here. These gentlemen have invested a lot of time and money in this, and they're not going to choose to put 2 1.5-story buildings on with an ADU, I guess. I can't speak for them, but I don't have faith in that. So I personally hope that we will hold these items rather than deny them and keep the public hearing open. And I think we should have a conversation, including ZAP, and invite them to our next meeting to see what they as a committee might feel about this zone change. Just wanted to make my positions clear before we voted. Now we're going to take 4 votes. First, Councillor Lopez.
I just wanted to say I agree with you, which is why I'm going to vote nay on this in the hope that we will hold it, because I agree that we should continue to try to modify the project in the direction that many people have suggested. Thank you. I just wanted to explain my vote.
Thank you.
Thank you
for saying that. And I would like to remind everyone that if you're going to vote no on this, you need to explain why, which helps prevent us from being sued later for denying projects without reasonable consideration. Then that's probably not the right legal term. I see more hands up, so we're not wrapping up quite yet. Councillor Down had it next. I will come to you, Councillor Block.
I'm agreeing with you. I think that is what I would prefer as well, is to get to yes on this.
And anyone who wants to vote against the project better state your reasons right now. Councillor Leary.
After the discussion that I've just been hearing, I will vote no on the proposal to deny all of these items, with the hope that we can bring this project back and take another look at it.
Councillor Lucas.
Real quick, I'm just a little confused on the 4 votes. I thought it was 2 votes, a motion.
Each will have a public hearing, closing or opening vote, and each will have a yay or nay to the docket item.
But it's 2 docket items and closing the public hearing, so that's 3 votes.
Each of the 2 docket items will vote on the public hearing and on the docket item. So that's 2 for each docket item. 2 plus 2 is 4. I know it's late. I can barely do simple math. Anyone else? Councillor Block.
Just a quick comment on getting to yes. I have heard this for years. I actually think that is contrary to our quasi-judicial role. We are here to make determinations. We are not here to get to yes. That's my understanding. Maybe it's wrong. The question about a zoning change, I mean, that's not quasi-judicial, so I think about that differently. But But I think getting to something different than what's in front of us tonight, I'd be very surprised if this is the last time we hear from the petitioner. I would be very surprised if there isn't something else that comes along that they benefit from this, this conversation. You're right, Chair. I had initially thought that I would move to hold this because I really want ZAP to have a formal role in this, and I really think that's very important. And we've gotten a flavor of it, and there could be more. But the general conversation seemed to accumulate so many reservations about this that I think for the benefit of our time, the petitioner's time, planning department, everybody's time, and this will come before the full city council, I'm sure, well, it has to, even on first call, and I would be surprised if it isn't put on second call, so we'll have another discussion. So I'm going to stay with my motions to close the public hearings of the two petitions and to reject them, and whatever the committee's will is, will be fine.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Block. We are about to try and take at least 4 votes because it might be more. And I'm going to say I apologize for using a pop psychology term like getting to yes when I don't usually like talking like that, but I do think that the special permit process, I'm not sure if I'm disagreeing with your interpretation, but I think part of our role is to make projects better if they're going to go forward. So that's the shifting and tweaking part that I'm talking about, that I use the expression that I now hate of getting to yes. I think it's time for us to take some votes, unless there are other very important things to say. Or if anyone was going to vote against agreeing with his proposal who hasn't stated your reasons. Yes, Councilor Block.
I think I should request a roll call vote on the.
Oh, of course.
Well, for the closing of
We're
the public
going to do
hearing.
that on both.
Right, thank you.
Yes, Councilor Farrell.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. If we agree with Councilor Block, we need to state our opinions?
Yes, because that is voting against the petition. Am I correct? President Laredo and Mr. Temple?
I actually think the requirement of speaking out is really for the full council.
At the full council?
I don't think.
But if you do it here, do you have to do it there too?
You're welcome to do it here. I don't
Okay.
think it's a requirement to do it here unless Attorney
Okay.
Temple disagrees.
No, President Laredo, that's correct. I will say, because we don't have a denial order written, it would be helpful if you're voting in favor of the motion to deny the special permit, just to give a brief summary of the reasons why, so we can craft it into the denial order, but it's not required.
And it may help how you speak at the full council too, if you said it.
But at the full council, if there's a motion to deny, I think anybody who opposes something should speak at the full council,
Absolutely.
even if it's brief.
And our president will instruct us at the full council time to do that for those who are not in this chamber right now. Okay, we're going to take, no, was your hand about to go up? Or were you not done? I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I will say that I agree with Councilor Block. I would very much like to see zoning involved in this conversation. And secondly, I think the project itself is facing simply too many concerns. I would love to see them come back with 2 separate developments of a couple of projects each. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to take a roll call vote on item number 273-24, which is the request to rezone. First, we're going to vote by roll call on whether we want to close the public hearing or not. After that vote, we'll vote on the motion, and then we'll move on to the other item. All set, Scott, thank you.
Councilor Block?
Aye.
To be clear, an aye supports closing it, closing the public hearing.
Councilor Downs?
No.
Councilor Farrell?
Aye.
Councilor Kelly?
No.
Counselor Leary,
No.
Counselor Lovovitz,
No.
Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Laredo.
Aye.
Motion fails.
So the public hearing is still open?
Yeah.
Okay, now we'll take a vote.
May I ask a procedural question to Attorney Temple? If the public hearing remains open, can we still vote on the main item?
No, you'd have to close the public hearing first.
So effectively, keeping the public hearing open precludes us from voting on the main item.
That's correct. You just hold the item.
That would be my understanding as well, because the whole idea of the public hearing is if you're leaving it open, you're inferring that you're going to have additional discussion.
Correct. You can't take final action on the item until the public hearing is closed.
So may I, Madam Chair, so effectively, does that place the matter on hold?
Yeah, you wouldn't need to take
Okay,
a vote on the
thank
next
you.
motion.
We don't even need a motion put on hold. It's automatically in hold because we've denied closing the public hearing.
That's correct. If you usually do a motion to hold at the end of the item, you can do that here.
I'm not sure that's necessary. Counselor Lucas?
So if we are by default automatically going to hold the item, what happens next?
So this is a good question that I would also like to ask the law about. If we're holding and not on, if we're holding on the rezone request, the question you're asking is, can we vote at all on the item itself? No. No.
My question was, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, that was too loud. Since we are holding the item, the zone change by default, what happens next?
You can still vote on the motion to close the public hearing on the special permit, and depending on the outcome of that, you can then vote on the motion to deny the special permit.
That's what I was thinking too.
I would recommend taking the next vote on the public hearing closure of the special permit, and then let's take it from there.
That's just exactly what I was thinking. Does that sound okay? Yes? Yes? Let's do that, unless, are people raising their hands to speak? Our understanding now, we know that the public hearing on the item to rezone is, the public hearing is still open, the item is held. On the second item, to allow the attached 6-family units, we're going to vote on closing the public hearing, which was the motion that Councilor Block made. So, clear? A yay vote means you vote to close the public hearing on this second docket item about the units, about the construction of the units. Please go.
Counselor Block,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
No.
Counselor Farrell,
Aye.
Counselor Kelly,
No.
Counselor Leary,
No.
Counselor Lovovitz,
No.
Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Laredo.
Aye.
Motion fails.
Both items still have the public hearing open and are held.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I may say, I appreciate everyone's reflection on this. It is my strong hope that the chair of this committee, the chair of ZAP, and the president will instruct us regarding the ways in which we can formally suspend our rules and involve the Zoning and Planning Committee in this process. I think that will help all of us just consider what's still before us. Thank you.
Absolutely. I expect that the chair of ZAP and the chair of this committee and the president and the vice chairs will be meeting to talk about how to proceed, and we will, of course, keep you all informed. That's it for tonight. Thank you all for tough conversations.